Hey everyone, welcome back to Essential Gear. This is part 2, and I am going to be going over what I think are some of the most important effects to focus on if you are first building your pedal board or first constructing your sound. You got a great amplifier, you got a great guitar that you like, and then what? I'm going to be going over what I think are some of the most important effects to focus on. Back in part 1, we talked about the relationship between overdrive in certain types of distortion and different types of amplifiers, Vox amplifiers, Fender amplifiers, the higher wattage Fender amplifiers, and a Marshall-style amplifier. And then we also looked at reverb and some common reverb-style effects that you don't want to miss out on. Today, we are going to take a look at delays and modulation effects. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about compression because I ran out of time last time, and I want to talk a little bit about compression and how a compressor might help you in your quest for tone as well. So I've got the AC20, the Vox style amplifier, called up. So I've heard it explained this way. This was explained this way on That Pedal Show, and I think it's the best practical explanation of compressor. Compressors are the overdrive for your clean tone. They do all the nice, spongy, feel-good playing experiences that we have when we play on overdrive, but they do that in a clean environment or on a clean tone. So if I pop this on the AC20, and if you take a look at the controls down here, my compression is up a fair amount, and then the level is actually boosting 4 dB. So I'm also using this a bit as a boost. I'm boosting the amplifier with this compressor. So if I pop it on, here's my tone again. You really don't hear a lot of change, but you can feel the change. Here's that lead stuff with no compressor. And again with. So you can hear a little bit of grit happening there, but more importantly, what it's doing is it's grabbing and sort of clamping down on all of my really loud notes and evening them out with my quiet notes. So that makes for a little bit more of a pleasant playing experience where I feel like I don't have to work quite as hard on the guitar. So that's kind of nice. Let me just go ahead and throw this on the Fender so you can hear what it's doing on the Fender. Because I'm boosting, and the Fender is such a higher wattage amplifier, you're actually going to get a really nice clean boost out of this. So here's the Fender now. And if I put the compressor on, and again off, I'm going to play some lead stuff, and then back on. So because the Vox is a lower wattage amplifier, it's going to break up sooner. This compressor going into the Fender just makes the Fender just a bit louder. I can crank the volume a bit more if I want some more volume into it. Here it is off. And you get a lot of level boost there in that regard. I'm going to put this back down to 4. So that can be a nice trick for a nice clean boost, and a nice clean boost that feels really good. If you're just kind of throwing a clean boost into a Fender, it's not going to do much for your playing dynamics, but the compressor can even out those playing dynamics and bring all those quiet notes. If you're doing some faster picking or something, it can bring those quiet notes up and make them a little bit more present in a mix. Now, another way that I like to use a compressor is actually stacking them with drives. And on a pedal board situation, I would probably run it this way. I would probably run compressor into my drive. Let's go back to the Vox, and here is the King of Tone going into the Vox. Lovely tone. Now if I stack that with the compressor, it's causing the drive to saturate a little bit more, and it's not really giving me much of a level boost on top of this stuff, but it is giving me a bit of a drive boost and bringing up the volume of my quieter notes. The other thing that it does, it makes your sustain last a whole heck of a lot longer. So if I'm playing and I hold out this note, holds in there pretty nice if I throw the compressor on. Stays in quite a bit more, so that can be nice for sustain, especially on like a Marshall style. Here's the 808 on the Marshall. And again, listen to the sustain. And then it kind of dies off there. Now if I throw the compressor on it, just makes those notes stick out quite a bit longer. Makes those notes, really stretches them out, which can be a nice thing. So in a pedal board situation, especially with like my nice driven Marshall here, with some drive for a good rhythm tone, throw in the compressor for a lead tone. So let's go ahead and move on. We're going to talk about delay, and there are really three main types of delay that are the most prevalent. The first one being digital delay. This is not the oldest delay, but it is probably one of the most common delay. If I pop this on, this is a digital delay. So what the digital delay is doing is it's actually copying, to the best of its ability, my exact guitar tone. And then it's fading out from there. There is also bucket brigade delay, and it's called bucket brigade. You can imagine old school firemen with water buckets passing the water from one to the next. By the time it gets to the end of the chain, there is, barely any water left to throw on the fire. That's kind of what a bucket brigade delay is doing with your tone. So if I play that D chord again, hear how the tone just gets darker and darker and darker and darker? That's what a bucket brigade is doing. And then there's also tape, which is kind of the happy medium between, both of those extremes. And I don't want to get too much into the nuance of the tape heads and everything like that here, but really just focusing on the tone. The tone is somewhere kind of in between. So it is a bit bright, but then it kind of rolls off the further and further down you go. So we're going to go back to digital delay. Digital delay, I think, works really well for rhythmic delays, so delays that are synced up to a tempo, and then a certain subdivision is then repeated with the delays. So I've got my digital delay set up to a dotted eighth, and a dotted eighth note is really important. So this sounds like this if I play in time with my 120 BPM, which I have everything set at. So so that whole edge style, U2 style delay is in a very simple form a dotted eighth repeat, and that's where we get a lot of the modern worship stuff is doing this, and even some of the newer music that I've heard on the radio has guitars doing this sort of thing a lot too. So it's just one of those prevalent things. Works really well for that because those attacks are the same in tone quality as your original guitar tone. It helps to create that illusion of this, multiple guitar, massive wall of sound type thing. If you throw a little bit of drive on there, and then let's change the reverb over to our cloud reverb that I said is pretty prevalent in worship styles, then you get that sort of thing. The reverb tails, keep that. And notice I have fewer repeats on the delay. There's like one or two prevalent repeats on the delay. That helps keep it clean. And then this is kind of a fractal thing. You probably won't find this on your analog pedals unless it's a really interesting analog pedal. But because it's so easy to do stereo in the fractal, there's also, even though this is a mono delay, this right post delay control knob here is going to just offset the right side delay just a little bit, only about, almost 10 milliseconds. But what it does is it forces your ears to perceive the delays on the outside of your guitar signal. So it sounds like this. And that's cool because it keeps all of your initial guitar tone right down the center and then throwing the delays out to the side, so it's a little bit less muddy than this with all of those effects on. That can get a little bit more muddy having everything right down the center. All the digital stuff, the Axe effects, the Helix stuff, I would assume even the Kemper to some degree, but especially the Helix and the Axe effects really make stereo incredibly simple, which is one of their advantages. And I think I'm going to do a video on the advantages of digital systems and analog systems both in the future. So stay tuned for that if that interests you. Let's move on to BBD, Bucket Brigade delays. And here we are. I like to use these for really, let me go back to Spring Reverb, that's pretty long. I like to use these for almost like a cushion underneath my playing. I like to use these more for atmosphere or for feel. Because they're so dark and underneath, it's almost like they're interacting with the reverb just to create a little bit more space underneath the guitar. So you can play, if I'm, playing clean, clean-ish, kind of as you break up. You really kind of hear that stuff only when I lay off. And then it kind of dies out. So I like that. I like tape for that similar effect. And tape is a little bit more high fidelity, a little bit closer to the digital, rather than the darker tone of the Bucket Brigade delay. These both I would use kind of interchangeably. I probably prefer tape delays more, and I would use these interchangeably for sitting behind my initial guitar tone and really kind of throwing on for a really big lead sound. So let me go over to the Marshall here, and let's call up a big lead sound. Let's throw that fuzz face back on. So we have that sort of idea. And let's take our BBD. Here it is with the fuzz face. So kind of think of like David Gilmour, Pink Floyd type guitar tone. Massive guitar sound and a lot of delay going in there. We can probably actually bring the mix up just a bit. You don't want to bring it up too much, otherwise it starts washing out your tone, especially if you start playing more and more notes per second. Let's hear this with the tape. So, without the delay, it is cleaner, but it is a little bit more anemic sounding. This gives you a lot of character and a lot of bigness. So if I go ahead and put over this, bring over this digital delay, it's not the same effect, right? A lot more mud in there. You really can't hear the notes. You can't really hear the lines that I'm playing. You're just hearing a bunch of notes being delayed and cascaded on top of one another. So Bucket Brigade analog delays and tape delays really work well for the big lead tone idea. All right, let's go ahead and talk about modulation. I'm going to bring up the Fender here so we can hear a little bit more of what's going on. This nice big clean tone. There's a pretty big wide world of modulation. I'm going to focus on like 4 or 5 effects that are kind of like your main ones, and a lot of the smaller subspecies of modulation effects fall into usually one or 2 of these categories. So let's start with my favorite, and that would be phaser. I really like a phaser for adding, again, another way that I call these effects, I call them swirly effects, and they're just adding a little bit of movement and a little bit of interest to your sound. So you can hear this phaser is really nice and subtle. And it's just adding a nice bit of interest there on that clean tone. If I throw some drive on it, sounds good with some drive as well. Now, in the phaser category, I'm using kind of this hi-fi 8-stage phaser. The oldest phasers, like the Script 90, sound a little bit different. They're a little bit more aggressive. You get a little bit more of that vocal quality in this. Of course, this is the phaser where, let's see, let me go over to the Marshall, and let's put on the compressor and let's do the tube screamer. Of course, for the Eddie Van Halen thing, he would be using like a Script 90, and that's how you get that that movement happening under these tapped parts. Right, so there's, not only are those tapped parts kind of jumping out, but then there's this element of movement over that. He was using a MXR Script 90 phase pedal. Now, while we're on the topic of phasers, let's also talk about a very closely related effect called vibe or univibe, which falls into the phaser category, but it's a little bit more of a primitive phaser. And these in particular, you can see most of these effects, chorus, phaser, flanger, tremolo, I like to run after my initial gain setup. So my gain chain would be my compressor, my overdrive pedal, my amp, and then cab, because those are doing drive stuff as well, right? And then I like to run my chorus and my phaser and my flanger and tremolos after my initial gain setup. Now, if you're in analog world and you've got a pedal board, then you would be doing something like you would do your compressor, your overdrive, and then you would go on to your modulation, chorus, phaser, flanger, tremolo, and then you would go into your delays and reverbs and then out to your amplifier. If your amplifier has an effects loop, then you would put all of your drives before the amplifier, so compression, drive, go into the amplifier, and then effects loop out, chorus, phaser, flanger, tremolo, delay, reverb, and then go back into the amplifier. That'll keep things really nice and clean. But for the, like if you're using something like an AC 15 or something, you would want to go compressor, drive, modulation effects, delays and reverbs, and then go into the amp, because I don't believe those have an effects loop. But I could be wrong. Let me know if I'm wrong in the comments below. So, vibe is, again, think of the Jimi Hendrix style effect. And you can pair this really nice with the fuzz face for all things Jimmy. And a little bit of Robin Trower sound in there. I like to run my vibe before the fuzz. Now you can switch around and do this afterward like this. I feel like it's a little bit more shrill that way. And here it is again, phaser before the fuzz face. You just get more of that throb. And that throb is what is creating that interest on those Jimi Hendrix style tones. So I like this vibe effect, this univibe effect, is one of the strange ones where I think it actually sounds better running it before your drive effects rather than after your drive effects. So regular phasers I run after, and then univibe styles I run before. Any of this stuff, though, you can always just take that with a grain of salt. You can run things however you want, and if you like the tone of it, you like the tone of it. But there are a couple of standard ways that a lot of guitar players that have come before all of us have run these effects to great success. Let's go ahead and talk about chorus now. I'm going to start with this stereo chorus because the early choruses were always kind of meant to be stereo. And I know that the Boss CE1 actually came out of the Roland JC120, and the Roland JC120 was actually a stereo amplifier. It had two 60-watt stereo amplifiers, and when you threw the chorus on, it was actually using both of those amplifiers and both of those speakers to create the chorus effect. When Boss then put it in pedal format, they left it in mono. But if you listen, hopefully you're listening in stereo, you can hear the effect of, let me go over to a cleaner amp. You can hear the effect of chorus happening in stereo a lot. I think it's a lot cleaner and it's a lot better sounding than in mono. Again, just my opinion, but that chorus sound is actually really nice. I kind of like that on a clean tone. If I flip over to mono, it just starts kind of sounding like the 80s. And again, I'm going to go back to stereo. It's not my favorite effect. If I need to put something swirly on my pedal board, I wouldn't be doing a mono chorus, I'd be doing a mono phaser. But they can sound nice, especially for a clean tone. And there's also an interesting thing that happens too if we are playing with some drive. Let me go over to the AC20 and throw on some drive. Chorus can give us a bit of a widening effect on a lead tone. It can kind of actually add a little bit of brightness to our lead tone. If I pop that on, get my volume back. If I turn this off, and now back on, that can add a little bit of brightness and help us to actually jump out of a mix a little bit more. So that is one clever use of chorus that I do know about if I was putting it on my board. Let's go ahead and talk about flange now, or a flanger. And these I don't really use a whole lot, but there's a couple of instances where I would use a flanger. Namely, the first thing that I could think of is to put onto a clean tone. Flange and chorus are really similar, but the process of creating the effect is very similar, but then they're kind of doing some different things with the effect. So there is an element of movement here. And let me turn it off so you can get a reference. And on. Areas where I have used flange in the past are when I need to recreate like Tom DeLonge's clean tone from the Blink-182 self-titled album. So if I throw on a bit of drive, and not just his clean tone, but a little bit of his when he switched to using AC30s, his AC30 drive tone, something like let's see. So getting that sound there. Also, if I go back to clean, it was flange, not chorus, or a flanger, not chorus, in the Police song, Every Breath You Take. A lot of people think that that was choruses. It was actually a flanger effect, but like I said, the process to create them is very similar, but then they're doing a little bit of some different things afterwards. So those are two areas where I would use flange. Let's go ahead and turn on tremolo. This would be my other favorite modulation effect. Tremolo is nice because it gives you this, again, a pulse, kind of like the vibe or even the phaser. That sounds really nice. That's just a simple tremolo. That's just a dip or a series of dips and rises in your volume. So rather than chorus or phaser or flange, which are actually kind of splitting your signal and then altering one side of the signal before it rejoins the signal, tremolo is just affecting your signal in one way. It's either just turning it down or turning it up. My favorite tremolo is a harmonic tremolo, which I have really no idea how it works. It's one of the earliest amplifier tremolo designs, so like Fender, Brownface, or Blonde era type thing. And it doesn't really do the volume thing so much, although it's perceived a bit that way. But what you hear is, again, not unlike a phaser or a univibe, it's this pulse that happens. So the actual volume dip there is a lot more subtle, but you get this almost nice univibe style. And it sounds like I've got, oh, that's the tape. I'm going to turn the mix down on the tape a little bit. That just sounds absolutely lovely. I love harmonic tremolos. The Strymon Flint pedal has a great harmonic tremolo on it if you're looking at, real world pedals there. So there we go. Those are the effects that I would focus on first. Drive, maybe a compressor in there, but certainly drive. I would get a reverb or have some sort of reverb sound in my arsenal. There's a lot of amplifiers that have reverb built in. I'd get a great delay pedal that I can do a lot of different stuff with. The Boss DD7 has served me well for a long time because you can set that up to be an analog delay. You can do tap tempo with it. But I also love my JHS Panther Cub. That's also a great analog delay that you can tempo sync as well. And then after you get that stuff sorted away, then maybe you think about a modulation pedal. So chorus, phaser, flange, tremolo, univibe, having some sort of element of swirl in your guitar sound arsenal is really usable as well for those clean patches, for those intimate parts, or just for adding a little bit of movement and interest under your guitar tone. And that will make for a very well-crafted pedal board, a very well-crafted tone that you can use in many playing situations, all the way from jazz to country, from rock to pop, and anything in between. Hope you guys found that helpful. If you have any favorite modulation or time-based effects, go ahead and let me know what those are in the comment space below, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.